Okay. Well, how are we doing? Today's lesson is going to be a little bit about the history of a particular hospital. And you're probably wondering, why are we looking at this really big lake? Well, we're actually on the southern tip or southern end of Wallam Lake, which is a lake that straddles both Rhode Island and Massachusetts. And most of it is pretty much undeveloped. You're probably wondering, okay, why am I here when we're going to be talking about tuberculosis? Well, it's because this is the hospital that many people ended up going to in the state of Rhode Island if they happened to catch tuberculosis. It was built in 1905. All right, it's the Eleanor P. Slater Memorial Hospital, but also known as the Zambarano Hospital to many locals because of one of the last superintendents. And it housed a number of patients, and it was based on what is called the open air concept. And the open air concept is that a particular gentleman, he was a doctor, Dr. Trudeau, happened to catch tuberculosis. And pretty much it was a death sentence. So tuberculosis is actually a bacterial infection that's usually contracted through the lungs. And what ends up happening is that, basically it causes inflammation and it clogs up your lungs. It's going to shorten your lifespan. Well, anyways, Dr. Trudeau happened to catch it, and he figured, okay, I'm pretty much done. I'm just going to go to my cabin in upstate New York near Saranac Lake and just live out the days of my life in, peaceful nature. Well, it turns out that when he was up there, the cool, dry air and the cool, dry, fresh, open air and getting away from the pollution of the city and so forth, it seems like many of his symptoms went away and he lived a much longer life. I do believe that he finally succumbed to tuberculosis. Oh, there's something walking around in there. But anyways, people, the hospitals functioned a couple of purposes. Number one, it was quarantine. We all know what that's like, okay? Oh, we can hear some waterfowl. There's a lot of ducks and geese around here. So this hospital, what it did was it actually helped quarantine patients. One of the most common ways of transmitting the bacterial infection was actually in mills where people would be sharing spindles from a shuttle, it was called a shuttlecock. And what it was is that people would be sharing the spool or spindle of thread. And one of the ways to thread the machine was to take it and suck a piece of thread through it and then tie it in a knot and then, start your shift on the machine. Well, if I had tuberculosis and I sucked on it and then started my shift, and then the next person started their shift and they had to reload that shuttlecock, as it was called. I think it was called the flying shuttle. Guess what they caught? Tuberculosis. So anyways, the hospital served a couple of functions. One, the biggest one was actually quarantine. It kept people from spreading the infection. And two, it did give some comfort in the sense that you were here in the countryside, fresh air, and generally better food. In fact, this place had its own, it was self-sufficient. It raised its own chickens. It raised its own pigs. It also raised its own vegetables in the gardens. And it was almost like a little miniature town in and of itself. Okay. And as we look over here, I just want you to make note of the building. You're probably wondering, why are there railings on the outside? Well, those were patient bedrooms at one time on the inside. Back in the day, somebody had this idea that they would actually take patients and put them out in the wintertime. They'd have beds on those balconies over there outside, bundle them up so they could breathe in the freezing cold air. They thought freezing cold air would help cure or at least abate the symptoms. It really didn't, because the freezing cold air was actually inflammatory. And one of the things I just want you to notice, so I know a little bit about the area. Again, it's kind of its own little town or a miniature. It was a community. Let's be honest, it was a community. And you're probably wondering, okay, why is there stained glass over here on the side of the building? Okay, why is there stained glass? In the basement was a church, and for many years there was a priest. His name was Father Holland. In fact, in town there was a school named after him, and he served the needs of the Roman Catholic community in Zambarano. And you got to keep in mind, back in those days, about 60-70% of the people in the state of Rhode Island were Roman Catholic. So it kind of stood like common sense that chances are you're going to have somebody like that. Your patients, 7 out of 10 of them are going to be Roman Catholic anyways. And in fact, I was in there years ago, and he was like, I don't want to say a pure saint, but he just lived in his very tiny room. It had a little desk and a little bed, and then he spent all of his time serving his patients. Okay, so anyways, he was a very good man. So it was after World War II when a cure for tuberculosis was discovered. When antibiotics were discovered, doctors found out that they could treat tuberculosis. And so the need for these hospitals to be used as tuberculosis sanatoriums ended. But today, this hospital is used for mostly traumatic brain injury. There's about 85 patients here, and they're people that need basically round-the-clock care. Accident victims, hate to say it, opioid overdose victims with various issues that have occurred with it. And that's what the hospital currently is in use for. So anyways, I just want to add to that. Those buildings you can see through the trees there. Those were the quarters for people that worked here, because back in those days, if you worked at Zambarano, you could actually stay here. So they provided, basically they provided housing. So not only did you get a salary from the state, you also had housing. And it was very, very low rent. You did have to pay a little bit of rent, but it was super, super low back in the day. And the only thing you really needed was groceries. In fact, even this place had like a little store. So again, it was like its own little community out in the wilds. As you look through here, I'm just going to show you the woods. Yeah, I'm saying I'm obsessed with this. But it's surrounded by tens and thousands of acres of woodland. And again, the reason behind that was to keep people isolated. When people came here, they never really left. In fact, there are stories of people who would wave at their families at the bottom of the road on Route 100, and they'd have to keep a socially distance of about maybe 150 feet or more. And there were workers and doctors that would ensure that would happen. So I can imagine it must have been very, very difficult and emotionally telling. But that was the best they had in its day. Okay, so, here we are at the famous gray Toyota. So anyways, on that note, I am going to wrap it up, and this will be part of our little presentation. So, and then also don't forget, we got our written assignment, reading and written assignments. Okay, and when I post this up, I want you to make some comments in the document that I will post. Okay, I want to thank you.